Hayley, and since I'm always in the craft room, I thought it was about time I showed you around. We're at the bottom of my garden at the door to the craft room. Let me show you inside. Straight ahead of us, we have a door to the facilities. I don't think you really need a good look into there. And over here is what we call the craft room. So as you walk through the front door, we've got the loo ahead of you. And then if we turn left, we're into the craft room. We've got the crafting sofa, all my desks, the cutting table, and over here we have storage. And if we come around, we have the kitchenette and a dyeing plant. So this is the main sewing wall, and I usually have my ironing board just here, but you are currently sitting on it. So above the ironing board, I hang my press cloths. I have a real silk organza one for doing actual projects, and then cotton ones which I use for interfacing, and I also hang a ruler there. I do get questions about these. They are wall lights. My husband and I built this building ourselves, and we were trying to go with an industrial chic theme, and I don't think we quite nailed it on the lights, I'll be honest, but they are useful for hanging things on. My iron is a cordless Tefal model, Tefal, and I really love it because when I'm pressing a garment, and here's my little rolling pressing cart, I arrange all the seams exactly as I want them, either open or over to one side. And with my old iron, I kept catching those seams on my cord and knocking them and then having to rearrange it. So I do love the cordless iron. I will say it's not great for fusing interfacing. When you need a lot of steam over a long time, this just constantly needs to be recharged, because obviously without a cable, it only charges when it's on this base plate, and as soon as it needs more power, it starts beeping at you and it can be quite annoying. So I do have another corded iron which I keep in the house, and if I'm fusing interfacing, I will go and grab that. I have all my machines along here. This is my main machine, my overlocker, and my cover stitch. I'm going to bring you closer and show you all these tools. So an overview of my machines, we have the Pffaf Ambition 620, which is my main sewing machine. This is my Pffaf Admire Air 5000, and this is a Janome Cover Pro 1000 CPX cover stitch machine. If Pffaf did a cover stitch machine, I would invest in it because I am a real Pffaf girly. I love them. This shelf my husband built for me. I know, I'm a lucky girl. And it has a light underneath it. I can't put the light on in videos because it flickers. Had my time again, I would do it higher because I cannot push my machines all the way back against the wall, and that is actually quite annoying. So the tools I tend to have sitting on my machine is a magnetic pincushion, my little dish with my clips in, another pincushion, and these snips, which are my absolute favourite. So my sewing machine does have thread snips built in, which is amazing, but it leaves little tails which sometimes I want to trim. Often I don't. But these are curved underneath so that when you snip, it gets the threads, but it never catches the fabric. I absolutely love those, and they're never far away. This shelf is a bit messy, so I hope you can see what I'm talking about. I did tidy the craft room, but you know, I didn't go all out. We're all friends, aren't we? So I tend to have two sets of tools, and I know that sounds super lazy because they're like right next to each other, and surely I could just wheel along and reach and grab what I need. The reason I've duplicated it is because what I found is I would wheel over, grab something when I'm working at that machine, and then I would put the tool down, and then I would put collar pieces or press cloths on top of it, and then I wouldn't be able to find anything. Rulers, thread snips, everything was getting lost. So I deliberately have one over each machine so that I use a tool and I put it back. And I think these are Prim branded. I'm going to try and lift one up without tipping everything out. They have a kind of flexible web in there. And just to show you what I've got in here, that's a pencil. This is actually, I think, an interdental toothbrush, but it's very useful for cleaning a machine. That is a bodkin. I can't get on with this one. I know the point is that you thread it in that way, and as this thing moves down, it only gets tighter. But even if I do it that way, it always comes undone for me. I must be using it wrong. I prefer this little bodkin, which is almost just a massive needle. Great for elastic. This is a Prim chalk roller, and I'm going to confess I mainly bought it because it's turquoise, but I've got to say, sorry Prim, it's not my favourite. I find the wheels almost sharp and they sometimes catch the fabric. I prefer these clover ones, much less attractive, but actually do a better job. We have some tweezers, which just came with my sewing machine. This oil came with my sewing machine, and I need to remember to oil all my machines actually. Another Prim Love Sewing quick unpick. The screwdriver that gets the plate off my machine. More cleaning brushes. More cleaning brushes. Another chalk marker. And this little thing is from my ruler. I was using a hemline adjustable gauge, and my husband was laughing at me saying, why are all the tools they sell to sewers so flimsy and rickety? And I was like, I don't know. So he bought me an engineering ruler. And what I love about this is the measurements start right at the end. There's, normally you get that little gap and then the measurements start. Not with this one. And it came with a slidey thingy, which is useful for hemming. Honestly, I don't really use it, but I love this. It was made in Japan. It's such beautiful quality. I've had it now for about 3 years, and the one that I bought from Joann's that was aimed at the home sewer, all the numbers rubbed off really quickly. It was flimsy, it bent. This thing lost its traction because it was held on with plastic and just went flying off one day. I adore this, but I don't use that bit much. Also up here we have a scent diffuser, just because I like things to smell nice. This is an Old Spice jar where I keep all of my bent pins and needles, and the sticker on top is just so I know where to open it, because I could just never find the right place. Some tape for altering patterns. A pen pot, and it's just as you would expect, pens and pencils. Also a screwdriver for getting in my machine if necessary. And a telescopic magnet. If I just drop a pin, I make a point of always stopping and picking it up so I don't tread on it. But if I drop this, I need the help of a magnet, because if you drop this from any kind of height, they scatter absolutely everywhere. These are my other favourite marking tools. A Prim Aqua Trick Marker. I started using these in my hand embroidery days as a teenager, and I love them. They mark so clearly on white fabric and disappear with just the lightest misting or a drop of water. Got another one there. I use highlighters if I'm tracing patterns, just to mark, or on PDF patterns to mark my size lines. Friction pens, because if you know, you know. And these are, they're actually intended for overhead projectors. If anyone remembers the days of overhead projectors, a lovely Stabilo fine permanent marker, and this is what I trace my patterns out in, because it never fades. The line is thin but very dark. Absolutely love these, wouldn't be without them. I think the rest is just pencils. Oh, this came with a sewing set and it's terrible. It's a chalk thing with a brush on the end. The chalk never seems to mark for me. The brush scratches the fabric and feels like it's damaging it, but doesn't get the chalk marks out. So maybe you're supposed to wet them. Tell me in the comments if I'm using that wrong, because yeah, I've never got on with it. And here we have something that my mum actually bought my kids when they were little to play with, and they did play with it and they did love it. It's a tiny dustpan and brush, but it's great for sweeping down my desk when it's all covered in fluff from overlocking, and then I just tip it in my overlocker bin. Box of tissues, of course. And then here we have mainly cutting things and another metal ruler that goes all the way to 0. And you can iron on them, I will say. Obviously, they're metal, they absorb the heat and they will burn you if you touch them afterwards, but they definitely won't melt. We have my paper scissors. Yes, I do put stickers on them because, you know, it's me. A small rotary cutter, which is nice for tight curves, like the crotch piece on underwear or armholes. And then I have 2 big rotary cutters, and you'll see one of them says "put on the blade." And I've written that on with the overhead projector pen. And I don't actually know how I ended up to have 2 of these. I think it may have been an accident or a gift maybe. But anyway, once I had 2, what I started doing was when a blade goes blunt, I write P on it, and this becomes my paper blade. So if I need to cut out a paper pattern, I do it with this one. This is the one I use for fabric, and when this blade becomes blunt, I will write P on this one and I'll put a new blade in this one and throw away the old one. So my bluntest one is always paper, my freshest one is always for fabric, and they're both Fiskars brand. This little doodad I bought at the Knitting and Stitching show, and it's a seam roller. So if you have a seam where it's too tight to get in there with the iron, or maybe the fabric would melt, or you're working with leather or vinyl, you roll this along the seam to press it. I had seen these for a long time and they were really expensive everywhere except at the show. I'm sure this was about a £5. I haven't used it loads, but when you do need it, it's such a great tool, and it's the only thing that works. And for scissors, my big cutting scissors are a pair of Fiskars. I do dream about getting some fancy scissors, and maybe one day I'll put them on my birthday or Christmas list. But I also am a person who suffers terribly from buyer's remorse. So I would really need to do my research and decide. Yeah, so for the time being, we use those. These were some cheap sewing scissors that came in a set. When I first started sewing, I bought one of those big packs with tape measures and every colour of thread and some flimsy scissors, but they're actually very useful because my girls can work them. Their hands aren't big enough to use the Fiskars, so they use those when they're in the craft room with me. These are my pinking shears, and they're just John Lewis brand. They've served me well for a really long time and they're still sharp. They're very heavy, but I love them. And then I have a pair of duckbill scissors, and I use these to grade seams or to trim away a hem after I've stitched it. Because as you go under with these, it pushes the lower fabric out the way so that you are less likely to catch your main fabric. I won't say it's impossible because I have done it, but this curve as you're going along a seam trimming, say a collar or something, it just pushes everything else out the way, and they're beautifully sharp and stepped as well, which is nice. So they're a real asset. On the other side, I have lots of the same things, but with a few variations because this is the overlocker side. So again, a screwdriver, some chalk markers. This little thing came in a paper crafting set, but it's so useful for sewing. At one end, it's just a sharp point, which I use for poking through paper pattern pieces. Say I want to mark the end of a dart, I poke a hole with that and then run over it with my chalk marker. And on the other end, it has a needle threader. So I just said it came with a paper crafting thing, but probably it did come with that sewing set, didn't it? But that is so useful. Love it. How many times can I say love it in this video? Stop it, Hayley. Yet another quick unpick because we can't have too many of those. A yarn needle because I use them for hiding overlocker tails. Another yarn needle, and I'm going to have a rant about yarn needles. Who invented this one with the massive step? Because it just catches on everything. The whole point is that you should be able to glide into the stitches. And this stands up for sewing or crochet. I think this actually came in a crochet set. But if you're trying to weave in the ends with this going through stitches, every stitch gets caught on this hump. So I actually hate that one. Another screwdriver, another screwdriver. This is a little machine threader that came with my cover stitch, I think. And let me tell you a little story about this. It's really awkward to use, takes me ages, quite difficult to thread a machine with it. And yet, because the instruction book said to thread it with this, that's how I threaded my cover stitch machine for about 8 years. Until one day, I just thought, can I just thread it by hand? Poke the thread through front to back and pull it through with tweezers? The answer is obviously, yes, I could, and I've never used this since. Why did it take me 8 years to figure that out? Why do I need permission to do something differently? Bonkers. These I use to thread my overlocker, and they are reverse tweezers. So when you squeeze them, they open. Whereas this pair that came with my sewing machine are open, and when you squeeze them, they close. Small difference, but really important when you're trying to thread an overlocker, in my opinion, because when you're relaxed, the thread is held taut. They are Pfaff branded. They were quite expensive. I bought both of my Pfaff machines from Barn Yarns. And when I bought the overlocker, which was my big 40th birthday present, there was a deal where you got, I think it was a £90 Barn Yarns voucher for buying a machine with them. And I just really went all out and treated myself to the two Pfaff items here and a few other bits and bobs. And the reason that I keep these snips over on my machine side is because annoyingly they look the same when they're standing in the tool thing. So I was always reaching for the wrong one. So I keep the black Pfaff snips over on the sewing machine side, and I keep the black Pfaff tweezers over on the overlocking side, and these snips, which are pink with the overlocker, so that when I'm reaching, I know if I'm going for snips or tweezers. And these I bought quite a few years ago. Again, they were quite expensive. And when I've looked at them, on the side, they say Tula Pink. Now, if you've watched this channel for any length of time, you'll know I'm not into my designer fabrics, but I do think Tula Pink is a fabric designer. I only know this because I watch Adam Sews. He does a lot of quilting and he absolutely loves all of the beautiful, colourful prints from Tula Pink. So I don't know if they also sell haberdashery items or if this was some kind of collaboration to make the snips this crazy colour. But there you have it. I always keep those On the Overlocker side, we have more yarn needles because they're just so useful for a myriad of sewing tasks. These little things go into the side of the machine shank to measure your seam. If you know what I mean, you will know what I mean. If I've not explained that well, you'll have no idea. I never use them because I don't know if I'm not tightening the screw enough, but they always move. So if I want to mark an unusual seam allowance, I just use washi tape. We have a hump jumper, and I mainly use this with my cover stitch machine. It is useful sometimes for my sewing machine, but my cover stitch really needs it every time I go over a seam. I have to use this, seriously, else it skips a stitch. And if a cover stitch machine skips one stitch, the whole row of stitching loses its integrity. Has anyone else got a hump jumper with a hole in it where you ran over the needle? Yeah, this one. I think this is, you put a needle in to put it in your machine, I think. And I do believe that one came free with my Pffaf machine, which was very nice. We have yet more cleaning brushes. This is a stiletto. I wanted one of these for ages, but they're like £14, so I really ummed and ahed over it for the longest time. And yeah, buyer's remorse, because the little silicone tip broke off within a matter of months, and that's what gives it the grip to be able to push fabric. I was using it to get fabric into my overlocker where I didn't want my fingers to go too near the blade, so I'm annoyed about that. I do still use this end to push anything nearer a needle or the overlocker blade when I want to be sure my fingers go nowhere near it. So it is still useful, but... And while we're on the subject of buyer's remorse, these scissors, I only bought them fairly recently at Liberty of London, and I wanted them because they are all metal. I have had previous pairs of really sharp small embroidery scissors, very, very useful, but with the, the traditional tortoiseshell plastic handles, that's where my last pair failed. The handle actually cracked. So I thought a metal pair would be amazing, because I do prefer to spend a bit more, just buy it once and be done for life. But these, they're just not very sharp. It's so frustrating. When I go to grade a seam or something, or even just cutting into fabric, if you want to do snips to mark your notches, it doesn't cut through first time every time, and that is very frustrating. Some things are forgiven because they're turquoise, but overall I wish I hadn't bought those. And yeah, my tweezers and yet more little cleaning brushes. This is the thermostat for this building, and these are my pattern weights. But can anyone guess what they actually are? They are samples of kitchen worktop. So when we were choosing our kitchen worktop, we had loads of different colours of white to choose from. And when we were done with them, I was like, oh, what can we do with those? My husband was like, wouldn't they make good pattern weights? Oh my goodness, yes, they would. It's a totally different day because this video took much longer to film than I thought, so if everything, including me, looks a little bit different, that is why. Let's have a look in this chest of drawers. I believe they are from Ikea, but my husband and I actually found these in a skip at the side of a road, and we hung around for a bit and asked the fella loading the skip if we could take them. He said yes. That was 15 years ago, and they're still in basically perfect condition, so I'm very glad we saved them from landfill. Let's have a look in the bottom drawer, which is pretty much all overlocker threads. This drawer is slightly deeper than all the others, which is why all my cones are in here, and the only other thing we have is a little tray with a few bits and bobs. We've got some hemming tape, all of my textile glues, and also a bottle of fray check. I mainly only use that for buttonholes, but it is useful. And then we have this 3-in-1 machine oil. So my sewing machine manual says to use high quality sewing machine oil. And one day my husband was going to the hardware store and I said, please could you buy me a bottle of high quality sewing machine oil? And he laughed in my face so hard. And then he went in the garage and brought me this and he said I could not do any better. And he is a mechanical engineer by profession, so I do trust him, but if you know any better, let me know. In this drawer we have all my reels of regular thread. They are in this cardboard kind of grid that I got out of one of my kids' advent calendars one year. I just thought it looked super useful, and I buy the really big reels of common colours like black, white, navy, grey, and then all of my smaller ones are in here as well. I have 2 trays full of bobbins. These are, no, one of them is still attached. These are for my current Pffaf machine, and I also still have a tray of ones for my older Pffaf machine, which I just use occasionally if I need a top stitching machine or if I'm making something where the lining is a different colour and I don't want to keep swapping my thread. These are threads that I just use for hand basting. They're just cheap ones. I think they were from that sewing set I've been talking about, so I don't put those in the machine because it doesn't like them. Here we have my 2 boxes of Vilene Form Band T12. I fuse this around necklines, armholes, anywhere that's cut in the bias instead of stay stitching. And I have that in white and also in black. I think they call it charcoal though. It's not quite a true black. And then in here we have tapes. So that's the last bit of my hemming tape, another roll of sticky tape. We've got washi tapes, which, as I've said, are used for marking seam allowances. And also in here, I found something I've been looking for ages. And I swear I looked in here, couldn't find them. Last winter, I made a Linton tweed gilet. And I knew that when I bought that tweed, they had provided a label and I couldn't find it. So I'm thrilled I found those and I am going to hand stitch it inside my gilet. And this little box is accessories that came with my overlocker, including the all-important wire that you poke through if the air threading tubes aren't working. You push that through and it pushes out any fluff or anything, all of the other bits. I don't know that I've ever used, and it came with a spare knife as well, which I was very pleased about. And in this drawer we have all of my machine needles. So this box my husband bought at a hardware store, and then one evening I sat down and labelled it all so that I know which needle is which. And on the side I keep a little bit of blue tack, and that's where I put a current needle, so that if I've got one that I've used but is not yet blunt, I know which one to use first. So we've got Microtex in 60, 70 and 80, Stretch in 70, 80, 90, Universals in 70, 80, 90 and 100, denim, and that is labelled for leather, but I've actually got little chalk refills in it. So that one's actually almost empty, but they're one of those things, anytime I'm ordering haberdashery and I want to get up to free shipping, I have a few standard things that I add onto the order. Chalk is one of them, another is machine needles. And these are overlockers in 80 and 90, they're hand sewing needles. And in here I keep all of the weird feet for my sewing machine that I don't know what they do. Because the only ones I really use are the normal one, the zip and invisible zip, the buttonhole, and I do use the blind hemming stitch and my edge joining one. But all of these others, I don't even know what they do. I think that is maybe for like free motion quilting. But they were all in the storage bit of my machine, and then I just found I was always rooting through looking for things, and I was like, since I never use them, let's get them out of the way. This is a Fiskars scissor sharpener, and Share below if you know how this works. I've watched tutorials on YouTube. I've tried multiple times. My scissors don't come out any sharper after I've used that, so I'm clearly doing something wrong. Here we have my Simflex sewing gauge, which I use for evenly spacing buttonholes. It's also useful for pleats, although I don't think I've ever pleated anything. And this is a box of pom-pom makers, Sarah Ashford brand at Home Bargains, and my kids absolutely love these, and I've used them as well to make pom-poms for bubble hats that I've crocheted. In this tiny tin I keep fastenings, so they are snaps, we've got another snap, some more snaps, those little things that keep your bra straps where you want them to be, hooks and bars in a little bag, and they're the instructions for the ones that you have to tap in. I clearly love my snaps, so I've also got a big card of them, a metal tape measure for home dec projects because you really do need a metal one if you're making curtains, stapler for when I need to join pattern paper together because I'll show you what I use in a minute. It's behind me and it's not quite as wide as I need a pattern piece, which is annoying. And these are weird needles. So these ones are curved upholstery needles, and I bought them actually to mend my pram. So you know that thing people do where go, tell me you have a baby without telling me you have a baby. Well, tell me you had kids in the late 2010s. I had an upper baby Vista and the handlebar had leather around it and the stitching failed, and before we sold it I just used one of these to repair the stitching and it looked as good as new. These are doll needles, so when I've made toys for my kids you need a really, really, really long needle to sew mainly ears on through the head of something. It feels very odd to do it, but when you need them, you need them. These are just bits of card I use to wrap things around sometimes. Here's my stretch percentage guide. I downloaded this off one of the pattern companies, offered it as a free download, and then I laminated it because of course I did. And they're stickers which I use sometimes instead of notching fabric to mark notches. Little thread nets, all these things that come with the machine that you don't often need. And then in here I have all of my bias tape makers, so I just have a full set of every size and they come in super handy. I really enjoy making my own bias tape. So this drawer is mainly for buttons, and here in this little acrylic divider, which was from Muji, I keep sets of buttons. So you may recognise these little boxes that you used to get with hemline. I am pleased to see they've now moved on to cardboard, which I think is even better. But any little sets I've got, I keep them together in a baggie. In fact, I think these are the leftover buttons from this Republique du Chiffon Dominique jumpsuit. So yeah, they're all little sets. These are some I bought at the Knitting and Stitching show. These ones I got at an antique shop. And then these are buttons that came with ready to wear stuff, you know, when they provide extras. I always just keep them here because this is where I'd be mending anything anyway. And then in these two boxes, which are old iPhone boxes, who remembers the iPhone 5? I keep cards of buttons. They're self-covered ones. And in this one, I keep loose buttons. And my kids know they're allowed to use any of these because they're not part of a set, they're just individuals. And if you're wondering what this is, my local charity shop will accept handmade clothes as long as it has a sizing label in. So I bought just a strip of this on eBay because I am a UK size 12, so all my clothes are there or thereabouts. And before I donate anything, I just quickly sew a label in. Here we have a pot of pins, a pot of bigger pins, a pot of big pins, 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 safety pins, and safety pins. Don't need to buy any pins for a while, do I? And here, right at the back, in another iPhone case, is just some old yarn that I use for gathering. If I want to gather a big skirt piece or something, I zigzag, a really wide zigzag over a piece of yarn and pull. And here we have mainly tape measures, a bit of tailor's chalk. To stop this getting bashed about, do you know what you need? A Pringles lid, or I think this is off a coffee. And then, yeah, tape measures. These are embroidery threads that I use when I'm making toys for my kids. And here are blunt blades for my rotary cutters. I just put those back in the original case because I don't really know how to safely dispose of them. And here's my pack of new ones. I think we need to add that to the Haberdashery order. And the top drawer, there isn't much sewing related. I do keep fabric samples in here. I don't really know why. And also hand sewing needles. This is the box for my microphone that I use for vlogging. There's the little case. I have loads of hair bands because when I'm getting stressed out doing a project, my hair makes me hot and I need to get it out of my way. Hand cream, of course. Cuticle oil. This little nail file is handy for anything plastic that's a bit sharp. So when I showed you earlier the little doodads that hook your bra straps into place, one of my lovely commenters told me that the sharp bits where it's been popped out of the moulding, you can file them away. And now I know, so obvious, but really, really useful. Nail clippers, because you know, when you've got an annoying nail, you've got to sort it out. A cigarette lighter. I think a guest left this behind at our house and I kept it because it's great for melting the ends of ribbons, ropes and things. Some pencil erasers, clips, thimbles. I don't know how to use a thimble. Honestly, someone tell me, is it so that as you're working you don't stab that hand, or is it to help you push the needle through? Can't compute. Lip balm, and more lip balm, because if you know me, you'll know I'm obsessed. Actually, this lip balm I use for hand sewing. I run my thread over it, so that's lint. Yeah, I wouldn't use this on my face. I run my thread over it because it's mainly beeswax and it strengthens it and stops it tangling so much. Don't laugh, but here are my safety glasses. I use these if I'm sewing buttons on by machine because you only get one pair of eyeballs to last you for life, and I'm just always worried about the needle hitting the button. And blue tack, because when you need blue tack, you really need blue tack. So if we come around to the kitchenette area, then tucked down here at the end of my desk is this Ikea bin. We actually used this for dirty nappies when my kids were little because we used reusables, and then I repurposed it as my scraps bin. So any scraps that I won't use or old clothes that are only good for fabric recycling go in there, and then when it's full I bag it up and my husband takes it to the household recycling centre for me. This is my mending pile. We're just going to carry on ignoring that. And down here we have a fridge and a rubbish bin and recycling bin. In here is the dishwasher. These drawers have cutlery for the kitchenette, clean tea towels, and then in this one I keep my pattern paper. And this is just an extra long roll of greaseproof kitchen paper. I buy it at Macro or Costco and it's dirt cheap. It's so long, I don't think I've ever finished one. And it's see-through enough to trace through, but it doesn't rip that easily. It's much stronger than tissue. And in this bottom drawer we have yet more iPhone boxes. Oh, an iPhone 4, that's vintage. In there I keep all of the scents for my scent diffuser, and in this one I keep the cartridges for my label writer, which I know that's quite meta to label your cartridges with the label writer, but what can I say? I gotta be me. And then up here we have a space for a microwave, but the microwave in our house broke, so it's currently over there. And on this skinny shelf I keep my guillotine, which I use for trimming paper patterns, although trimming PDF patterns, although I quite often don't trim them anymore. I just stick them on top and ignore it. Mugs and coffee. In this one we have the toaster that guests use, my garment steamer, a kettle for guests. These are the attachments for my steamer that I keep but have rarely used. Coffee pot, glasses, party glasses, party booze, party glasses, party cutlery. It's not like we're massive party people, it's just if we host a party it tends to be in the garden, and then we use this as like the party kitchenette. Do I sound a bit defensive there? We love a good party. And in here I just have a random fabric glue with no lid. Where's the lid? A label writer. That's the filter for the dishwasher, and actually there's something missing from there which I'm just going to go and get because I've seen it out the corner of my eye and it will annoy me. This is where the kitchen roll lives. Always useful because I am quite clumsy. So on this side of the craft room we have the sofa just in front of me there, TV for our guests, and then along the bottom we have some boxes with toys in for the kids when they're over here, and I am sewing. These boxes along the top are just our family memory boxes where we tuck mementos and tickets and drawings and things. And then along here we have Fabric for Fashion, the swatch book. This was a gorgeous present from my in-laws, and it is the most exquisite book with pages of samples telling you all about all the different fabrics, fibres, weaves. It is just wonderful. And next to that, Vogue Sewing, such a great reference book. I can look up anything in here and always find at least one thing I did not know. Gutterman shade card. If you know me, you know I love it. And my favourite home deck book, Cushions, Curtains and Blinds, Step by Step, DK, 4 instructional manuals. They never do me wrong. I love that book as well. In this little magazine holder from Ikea, we have interfacing just in A4 page protectors. And yeah, that label writer really earns its keep, doesn't it? This box is full of bag making supplies. It's kind of a big old mess, but it's just got all sorts in it. That was a belt my husband was throwing away. My husband bought that for a project once and never used it. Carabiners, eyelets, anything that's like hardware bag goes in here, and whenever I need something I have a dig through and just see if I've got anything suitable. This is where we keep all our instruction manuals for the house, just to save room over there. We've got some speakers because I like to have music on when I'm working. That is our wedding album because it's too big to fit anywhere else. Got some spare printer paper because you've got to keep it somewhere. This is my laminator, and yes, I did wrap the ugly box in, I think that's wallpaper, because I just thought it looked nicer. And this is my yarn stash where I keep all of my yarn, and I'm not buying any more until there's room. I am never going to overflow that basket because I don't think yarn keeps. I'm already worried about it fading in the light, and that jumper, I'm going to make it up very soon. This box is empty. This one is where I keep greetings cards. And I think that's the lot. And I said I'd show you my pressing trolley. This is also from Ikea, and my husband added a top that I then covered with fabric to turn it into a little pressing table. And on here we have my tailor's ham. I made this from a free pattern by Victory Patterns, and I stuffed it with fabric scraps. So I did some reading about making tailor's hams, and everyone said sawdust was the best. And I did actually ask my husband to get me some sawdust, and bless him, he did bring me a pile, but it was like garage spec sawdust, not like craft room spec sawdust, if you know what I mean. I didn't fancy it. So instead, I sat one evening and just chopped up tiny jersey fabric scraps into the tiniest of scraps, because if you try and shove big pieces in, it gets lumpy. So yeah, it served me well for years, no regrets. It's cotton. I know it should be wool, but I'm allergic to wool, so I never have any scraps of it. And you know what? A cotton one that does the job is better than a wool one that I never get round to making. And this is a sausage, same pattern, same principle. This is a pressing stick, which I use for bulky fabrics, where as you press it, you might worry that the seam allowance is going to shadow through. If you lay it with the seam allowance on either side of this hump, because it's shaped like a half moon, if you press right along the top, then the seam allowances go down the sides and you don't get a ridge with shadowing. And I saw these for sale and mentioned it to my husband, saying, oh, I'd like one of these for Christmas. And he did what, as you can probably guess, we always do in this house, and went, I can make one of those. So this is actually a broom handle. You know when you buy a new handle for your broom? Chopped in half, and works a treat. In the same vein, he made me a clapper, I guess, a piece of wood to put on top of seams that I've pressed to just weigh them down and make sure that they cool and dry that way. It's just got an old handle off a kitchen cupboard on it so that I can easily move it around. Again, probably the wrong kind of wood, still better than nothing. And then down here in the bottom is an empty project bag, go me, and then all my other projects that I have already cut out or patterns that I'm currently using. I keep my patterns in A3 page protectors, and any that I'm working on at the moment I keep down here just because I'm terrible for forgetting to mark notches. So I don't like to put them away until the project's finished because I always need to go back and reference a piece. And also down here I have my underwear pattern, and I keep that on my trolley all the time because whenever I have scraps of knit fabric, I just go ahead and cut out a pair of undies. So when you come into this building, if you turn it the other way, you end up here. Through there, you can see a shower room. Here is some home deck fabric. These are the curtains for our house. I bought the whole roll because it was from a jobber, and I'm just working my way through them. This is the waxy covering off a Baby Bell cheese, and you will understand why at the end of this video when I explain why we built this building. So these three cupboards are my sewing stash. In this one we have a box with all my patterns in. Up here we have home deck fabrics and then two drawers. In this one we have sewing machines and my woven fabric stash, and in this one we have the scrap drawers and my knit fabric stash. Let me reposition the camera and I'll show you the patterns. This is possibly one of the most awkward things I've ever tried to film, but this is the bottom of that far cupboard, and this is just a cardboard shipping box that I found that takes one of my patterns. So here is New Look 6035 in its A3 page protector, And I just found a box that fitted my patterns. And then by chance, I realised that this box fit perfectly in this cupboard. So it's where I decided to keep them. And it's really handy because I can stand in front of it and read through all my patterns. I keep them in alphabetical order by pattern company. So can you see a P there? Would you believe I've never got my label writer on this, have I? It's just handwritten. So I don't organise them any more than that because I've only got, say, 10 Vogues under V, so it doesn't take me long to just flick through. And I keep all my patterns in here, whether they are PDF or there's a PDF one, the Swim Style Carla loungewear pants. So that's my PDF pattern all taped together and everything, and then I just fold it up and put it in that page protector, and then they live in the box. In the drawer below, I keep my elastic, and this is in various states at various times. Sometimes it's quite organised and all these are wound onto little cards, and then I or my kids is looking for something and it turns into this jumble. These are all stretch lace elastics, which I use for making underwear. That's my big reel of waistband elastic, and then these are all bindings. So we've got bias binding, pre-packed hem tape, some more stretch lace elastic. I didn't know that was there. What a find. Oh, love that for me. This is elastic that I cut off a fitted sheet, and that's going to be a job to get it separated, but when the day comes that I need that width of elastic and my options are get in the car and go to Hobbycraft or unpick this, you know I will be unpicking this. And back here I just keep any fabric that I've already cut into bias strips, and also in this corner are fabrics cut on the bias. So I made bias strips from this to edge my George's Portfolio mellow top, and I didn't want to cut the rest into binding now because I don't know what width I need or want. So I've put it in here with this pink one so that I know those are already cut on the bias and ready to be made into bias tape when I know what length I want. That's all that was left from the last batch. And this bottom drawer is mainly bra making supplies. So this is strap elastic, thinner elastic for under the arms. These are all duoplexes and bra, tulle, etc. That is harvested off ready to wear. So that's a bikini that maybe one day I want a clasp off. And similarly, I just bag up anything ready to wear. You know when things come with extras? And they're all straps that I've cut off ready to wear because all of these sliders and rings will be super useful, and it is so hard as a home sewer to find small enough rings and sliders in a variety of colours. Back here we have curtain buckram for when I make curtains, and hook and loop tape. This is the stuff that goes in piping. Those are underwires. You get the idea, a little bit of everything. In this middle cupboard, I keep my woven fabric stash. It's often more organised than this, it's often less organised than this, but the main thing is it fits in this cubby. Success. That has not been the case always. And then down here on hangers, I have leather scraps. At various points in my life, I've done some leatherworking projects, and those are the remnants. And then I have my homemade zip organiser, also known as a trouser hanger with a piece of cereal box. And I started off really neatly stapling all of the zips on in order of size, etc. And I've ended up by just hanging the zips over there. But you know what? It's a lot easier than it used to be because previously they were all screwed up in a drawer and it was just a nightmare sorting through them. So at least I can see pretty much what I've got at a glance. These are ghost costumes for my kids from old sheets, and I'm not throwing them out because you never know when somebody needs to be a ghost. And this is one of those little Ikea ironing boards which I used to use in my tiny city centre apartment, but it is still useful sometimes for pressing. And I did forget to say, in the bottom of that cupboard is just space where I keep sewing machines when we need to clear out the main part of the craft room. And this is my knit fabric stash. Once again, it does all fit at the moment, ish. And in this little corner we have my old sewing machine, and that is some toy stuffing, and those are machine covers because I'm trying to think of an excuse, but let's just be honest, quite often I don't put the dust cover on my machine. These drawers are the scrap drawers, and this is how I like to keep the scrap drawers. Folded, neat, tidy. These are all old sheets and pillowcases. All my friends and family know they're not ever to throw away old bed linen because I use it for toiles. But this is what they usually look like because my kids know they're allowed to use any of this for any project they would like. So they quite often come in here and have a root, and I could make them fold it all afterwards, but I'd rather just encourage their creativity. So they're welcome to use all of those. Loosely, this top drawer is woven and the bottom drawer is knit. It doesn't always stay quite that organised. Shall we have a little debrief on the crafting sofa? And you can now see where the ironing board usually is. So a few people have asked me, was this built as a craft room? And the answer is no. When my husband and I got engaged, I sold my city centre apartment and we bought a derelict farm cottage, and truly derelict. It had a structurally unsafe lean-to downstairs bathroom, no central heating, single glazing. You get the picture. And we knew that in order to bring it up to modern standards, we would need to take it completely back to the shell. The roof had to come off and everything. And it's quite common here in the UK, if you're doing a huge building project like that or building from scratch, to put a static caravan on the garden. I think my American audience would call it a trailer, a single wide, and then live in that temporary accommodation whilst you do the build. And that is what we were originally planning to do as newlyweds. We moved into the derelict house and just made it as cosy as we could with a log fire whilst we got all of the planning permission and everything in place and all the plans drawn up. And when we were thinking about the prospect of spending quite a few English winters in a static caravan, my husband suggested an alternative idea, which was to build a permanent building that we could then use after the renovation of the house was complete. And so the two of us built this building for us to live in whilst we did the renovation works. And I say the two of us built it. I will see if I can find a picture of me helping. I didn't do a lot. My husband did 99.9% of it himself, and what a wonderful job he did. And then we lived here with two children for 4 years while we renovated the house. That was our kitchen. That was our dining area. This was our living room. All of the cupboards that I've shown you round the corner were where we kept all our clothes in those drawers. We had one drawer each. And yeah, it was wonderful, happy memories. It was very cosy. Sometimes it was a bit too cosy, and I have locked myself in that bathroom more than once. But overall, it was a wonderful idea because we were so much more comfortable than we would have been in a static caravan, but we were also on site, which is better for security when you've got building materials about. And it's also better to be there because my husband did the majority of the work on the house himself as well. I barely helped on that at all. But at least he was here on site and could work pretty much every hour of daylight that there was to get us into the main house. And I've got to say, now that we live in the big house, there are times when I miss this place, because it's surprising how often I have to run upstairs for something when here everything was within arm's reach. So we're so lucky now to have this on our property as a useful facility. I think with people working more and more from home since COVID, the money that we spent on it hopefully has gone on to the price of our house. And in the meantime, I've just stolen it to use as my craft room. How lucky am I? So I need to round out this video by saying thank you for sticking with me, because I know this was such a long one. And also I do appreciate how fortunate I am and how ridiculous this is as a crafting space. I do not take it for granted. I absolutely love it. And my channel name is not just a channel name. I am always in the craft room. Hope to see you again soon. Bye. Not a half moon, is it? Yeah, it is a half moon. My husband, who is making a noise, hang on. Oh, and if you're wondering what all that is, I don't know either. It's something to do with the internet. Probably powered this video being uploaded to YouTube.